Dun, 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 dun. We'd probably get hit with a copyright strike if I could actually play that. But this week we're going to review one of my personal favorites that Louisa has not seen, The Saint with Val Kilmer. We've been playing around with Notebook LM quite a bit, and it's been really, really helpful. I may have mentioned last week that it creates an AI podcast based off all our inputs and the articles that we wanted to read about this particular or any particular movie. And it laid out a whole bunch, the podcast that we listened to laid out a whole bunch of details that I didn't know about. Louisa, you have never seen this before. And
no, I haven't.
It's always fun to hear somebody's take or analysis and breakdown of a movie, because when you get inputs from other people, you can... a lot of times people can put into words things that you're thinking about, but you don't know how to verbalize. And I'm going to tell people right up front, I'm a little bummed out about this because we only got about 26 or 27 minutes on the subscription for this month. So though this is one of my most prized movies of the 90s, we're going to have to try and compress everything down into just over 20 minutes. So... you want me to go through the plot, or do you want to jump in?
You can go through the plot.
All right. So it's going to be a little compressed. Val Kilmer plays Simon Templar, a orphan who witnesses a tragedy with a fellow orphan, and then grows up to be, for lack of a better word, an international criminal, but by way of a master of disguise. Gets involved with the Russian mafia. The movie starts off, he's stealing a microchip from a oil magnate and has a run-in with the magnate's son, Iliad. Don't let me miss any key topics here.
I'm listening so that you... Yeah.
All right. Iliad. Iliad is a... how would you describe him? He's a bit of a thug, but he's a well-financed thug. He's a nepotism-type character, involved in a little bit of drugs, and chases down Simon Templar and tries to catch him, but Simon, being the master of disguise and like twists and turns with tricking his enemy, is able to evade Iliad, and through a series of You're gonna have to bring me back into the fold here with how they get reconnected.
Okay.
Raid's the. No, I'm thinking of the actor. Who's the actor who plays Tradiak, the oil magnate?
I don't know how you pronounce his name. He's Russian.
Raid Zerbejka. That's the best I can do. Actually hires Simon to steal a formula for cold fusion, with ill intent not to pay him. And this cold fusion formula, Raid is going to use in a plot to sell to the Russian premier to organize a coup. This is a plot point I found a little bit later. I'm jumping way ahead in the plot, but the plan is to sell the Russian premier this formula for cold fusion, have it be a dummy formula, have it not work, and somehow that's going to make the public mad at the president, when the president can just say,
I didn't have anything to do with it.
Well, this guy sold it to me. Be mad at him.
Yep.
But that plot point aside, even Tradiak recruits Simon Templar to not really seduce Emma Russell, who is played by Elizabeth Shue, as a kind of a rogue agent, he can't figure out how this woman works. Ivan Tradiak can't figure out how Elizabeth Shue's character works. He sent his own people kind of after her to kind of sneak into her place and steal things from her, but apparently, at least in the writing of the dialogue, she was too cagey for them. So his hope is that Simon being sent in will be this new element who can win her over and extract the information that he's trying to get out of her. When in actuality, what happens is Simon plays a character. He plays somebody else. He does his disguise thing. He plays a character, and while he's playing this character, he falls in love with Elizabeth Shue's Emma Russell. Now, this is interesting because as you go through this movie, you see, it's great to see a movie that has character development with one. It's great when you see it from a bunch of characters, but when it hones in on 2 or 3, I think that kind of makes for a good action movie because you just want to see it with
Follow 2 or 3 stories.
Yeah, and I think they set the movie up for Val to be this, he's this proper rogue who knows how to steal things, and
he's obviously done this kind of work before, so he's experienced.
Out for himself, but while he's on the job, he's on the job and he falls in love with the mark. And without giving away, I didn't want to spend the whole podcast talking about
the entire plot of the movie.
The plot of the movie, but so many great supporting cast. Alan Armstrong plays one of the Scotland Yard inspectors. Valery Nikolaev plays Ilya, and there's a bunch of Eastern European and Russian actors who I'm going to butcher their names, so I'm going to hang back from actually trying to pronounce them. But all great actors. Michael Byrne plays a campaign manager to Ivan Tradiak, and just does a great job of being a sinister supporting actor. Oh, and your girl Emily Mortimer plays the wife, who you never see her and Tradiak together. But what else? She was in stuff that you like.
Yep. Notting Hill, Mary Poppins, Return of Mary Poppins.
What was the other one? She was in that news show.
Oh, The Newsroom with Jeff Daniels.
With Jeff Daniels, right. So many...
Instantly recognizable. I sat up like, what? Ooh.
Yeah, like...
When she came on the screen.
Girl doesn't age a day.
Nope. Not a day.
I couldn't believe...
Not a day. Very well said, yeah.
I had just seen clips from The Newsroom, and I know that's not last year's product or anything, but I remember I
didn't even know she was in that.
Oh yeah, she's one of the producer. And as if you watch The Newsroom, you're like, wow, she looks the same as she does, and she only has like a bit part in The Saint. She's only in it for, I don't know, 4 or 5 minutes, but not even. She's
in Notting Hill for like 2 seconds.
Yeah. So, I would bet that The Newsroom was more of her. It's where she really got her foothold in, she was.
Is it a TV series?
Yeah, and forgive me if you've heard of it. You've heard of it. I couldn't tell you what it's on, but so from our notebook. In the larger context of The Saint, Kilmer's casting was seen as potential career course correction, after The Island of Dr. Moreau. Oh, I didn't really. Yeah, I saw Island of Dr. Moreau after this, and that movie was laden with stories of his bad behavior. He didn't get along with Brando. There was fighting. Almost fired from it, and his scenes were cut way down in that. This one was kind of considered tailor-made, like a tailor-made vehicle
for him.
Yeah, and the part of the reason why this movie didn't really anchor or get a franchise with Paramount is just the year before Mission Impossible came out and was doing really well. The Saint had a budget of just over $90 million and brought in close to $170, so it didn't quite double. And once marketing was figured in, they made money, but they didn't enough. They didn't make enough to put franchise ideas behind it at the time. But it developed a cult following as time went on. Because I'll talk to people now whenever I talk about movies. This movie comes up.
Yeah.
And we just found this out about 20 minutes ago. This is the 10th. Did you hear that? The 10th production of The Saint as a movie or a television series.
Oh, I missed that.
Yeah, they've done this 9 other times on television or as short films. The character, see if I can find production and background here, the writing for it, based on Leslie. God, this works so good. Leslie Charteris book series, The Saint. Sources confirm the '97 film is based on the character Simon Templar, created by Leslie Charteris in the series of pulp fiction novels and stories that began in 1928. From 28 to 63, he wrote it himself and then collaborated with authors from 83 onwards. The character of Simon Templar has a long history in various media before the '97 film. That was, I had no way of knowing that. I knew about there was a series on television with Roger Moore where Roger Moore played. It was a serial, which I never saw. But like our podcast that was AI generated told us at the end that there was an Easter egg at the end of this movie where Moore's voice appears on the radio. His God, I loved everything about this movie. And we were going for a walk earlier this week, and this movie came out in '97. I was in college, and the tech that was used was, I remember walking out of this theater thinking like, oh my God, we're living in the space age time. Because the Saint he had this really great, he just had this cool life set up for a bachelor. He had kind of a dangerous job, but he made a lot of money at it. And he kind of lived out of, as an older guy now, this doesn't sound so appealing, but he had a laptop and a phone to do all of his transactions and communicate with the mafia or whoever he was doing work for. But remember I said to you that he was using like an old PowerBook? And that like all the little apps that appeared on the screen, they did a lot of screenshots. At the time, we barely had Windows in the college computer lab. And they highlighted a number of products in this movie. Nokia had a phone that was it was almost like a little book, but it flipped open. The phone itself flipped open, almost like remember the Switch? It was like that, but bigger and clunkier, and it flipped. It was like you could not break it in half, but it opened in half, and it had a little keyboard on it, and you could send email through it, and that was just considered hot shit at the time.
Yeah.
phone goes the other way, moron. And what was the other thing? Oh, the Volvo had a Volvo had a big product placement. They used. I remember hearing this on the news. I'm not trying to take this whole podcast over. You can interject. You haven't said anything. I know people are sick of my voice and the number of times I've said on this show just because I get so excited about this movie. Volvo used this movie as an advertising piece for their new C70 coupe they released that year. And I think they held back a bit on the ad budget, the regular TV ad budget for this, just because they were, I won't say they never put products in movies, but this was a big one because it had 2 key scenes where they just showed the car. One where he's avoiding a hit squad in London, and he peels out and kind of almost runs over Iliad and gets away. And then at the end, when he avoids the detectives at Scotland Yard who think they've caught him, and he drives past them and
waves.
Yeah. So I remember that doing really well. I remember seeing those Volvos all over the road for the next 2 years after, like everywhere. What else haven't we touched on in here? Anything that you tripped across? Anything that you tripped across that was interesting? It was filmed in Russia.
It was filmed in Oxford.
It was? Mm-hmm. I've got a note here that said it was filmed in Russia.
Oh, where does it say that?
Under production and background. Oh. Well, hold on. It's probably split. Filming in Russia is highlighted as an interesting and visual element. The film's plot involves a corrupt Russian leader. Oh, you know what? This is another thing. Is I saw a couple of articles that said, I told you I watched this one YouTube of these 2 critics who were breaking down the movie. They also liked it, but they both said they had to watch this movie multiple times to understand the plot.
Yeah, I remember. I think we had a discussion about that the other day recently, and I
didn't think it was that tough to figure out.
No, I definitely didn't, and you know how I can get confused easy.
You had a harder time with The Hunt for Red October than this.
Oh, for sure, and that was confusing. Yeah. I needed explanation, but I don't.
Because they, like, in movies like that, they used a lot of, they used terminology and abbreviations a lot. And if you don't, especially anything that has to do with the military, when you're seeing a movie that has abbreviations or refers to the Department of Defense or the Department of Justice, and they use
code or something, yeah.
They use verbiage. And if you're not...
The common folk are not familiar with.
I wasn't in the military, but I've seen enough films that I know bits and pieces. And the Saint wasn't laid out like that. I like how they kind of framed it as a spy movie, but he's not really a spy. He's a thief. But the packaging of this movie would allow it to fall within the spy arena. Because he does so much covert stuff. I'm trying to see if there's any other interesting points here about the location where they shot it. Big finale is set in the Red Square. They did shoot that stuff with Emma Russell, with Elizabeth Shue in Oxford. Another thing I found kind of funny about this is they don't really address the travel. Because he's flying.
They really don't do that.
They're flying all over the place.
When you said that, yeah, they're here, they're there. Wow, that's a good point. They really don't. They just appear there.
Yeah, they started in Russia, and then he flies to quote unquote home to London, and then when he has his meeting with Tradiak, that's in Germany, because that's at Tempelhof
that's right.
Airport. That's in Germany, and then he goes back to London to do this work. the hit squad, his kid, Iliad, comes from Russia to London to try to shoot him.
Yeah.
And they just show up in London.
I know, I wondered about that.
Because you start to wonder as you're watching if it's all in the same place, and it's not. It's between London and Russia.
Yeah, that's very true. I did wonder, not so much for Val Kilmer's character, but for like the quote-unquote bad guys. Like, how did they know where he was, and how did they show up? Like,
do you remember how
they were
on the they kept him online?
I do, yeah.
Remember his beeper went off, and he's like, he's online, and he's having this exchange to say, I'm not paying, but I gave you what you want. Yeah, but it doesn't work, so I'm not paying you. And he did that. This is another cool, one of my other favorite little tech things they did is they had this program on a laptop that the guys were using in the car attached to a cell phone to triangulate where his signal was originating from, which for the time in 97 was ridiculous.
Way cool, yeah. I could see that.
It was bananas. Like,
and that was like the Wheel of Fortune coding communication. Is that what you're kind of referring to?
What do you mean?
You know how he would send the messages and then the screen would like flip. That I was gonna mention that earlier when you mentioned the
his like
the power book
encoder.
And the technology for this movie for that time, because I just thought that was pretty neat. Like, it seems, watching it now, it seems very primitive, but when you think about like they
during
don't
97.
97 they didn't have in 97 what they have now, so it was pretty cool.
Not to say this didn't exist back then, that like email couldn't be penetrated, but it was not even remotely a discussion. Like,
no email
hacking, that wasn't even a thing.
Not even very.
So getting an email, you'd be like, I'm the only one who's getting this.
Right. It's going from me
to whoever's getting it.
The person you're asking
because
for.
it wasn't super widely used. And they made a point to whenever he was sending a message that it went through this encoder. That it was all mixed up, and then whoever received it had to have a key and read it.
I thought that was pretty cool.
And that, we do that now with VPNs, but
they didn't have that back in 97.
Yeah, and not only that, just the idea that he didn't really need that, but it played so well on screen. It just added the layer of how like super secret and hard to find him. The scene where he's talking with the buyer for that microchip, that's my favorite scene in the movie. He's eating the apple after he beds
when
lady.
he goes back to
He's got his little earpiece in. He has his flip phone open, and he's looking at the deposits in his Swiss bank account on his laptop.
I remember.
It was just such at the time, again, ladies and gentlemen, it plays differently than it plays now. But at the time, that was, if you were young and male, thinking, this would be such a better way to make a living than having a 9 to 5. But we only got a couple minutes here. Reception was a little unusual. It didn't do a tremendous box office. It was fairly successful. 169.4 on a $90 million budget. The number 2 film in the box office, its opening weekend ranked 28th out of 303 films done that year. Barely broke even.
That doesn't seem like such a bad rating to me with all the other movies that came out. And also, you have to remember, did we talk about this already, that it was coming out as Mission Impossible was starting up, and what's the other franchise?
Oh, it would Bond.
How would I forget? Yeah, so, I mean, that's like a lot of competition for a sort of similar kind of movie.
And that's from the YouTube I watched about this, those two guys who were comparing it. You're bringing Iceman into competition with Maverick.
Yeah, right.
Again.
And James Bond. And who can really compete with those two? And they went on to be huge franchises.
It's really unfortunate, too, because Kilmer is he just looks
Well, James Bond was already up and running.
Yeah, but the movie was really... It was competing with a embedded franchise that had a lot more play. And Simon Templar I'm sure they would have developed it further, but he had just come off not only Island of Dr. Moreau, but also Batman, and his portrayal in Batman, I don't think he really enjoyed.
Yeah.
But this,
I was reading about that.
This, from what I've heard, he really, really enjoyed working on it, and it's just a shame it didn't do more money. They couldn't pull a franchise out of it. And the discussions, we're almost out of time here, but the discussions about them remaking it now, which you and I think are in firm agreement that we both enjoyed this. Something's perfect.
You don't need to
do
another one.
Yeah, and quite honestly, I think it would run into the same problem it had 30 years ago, and it just doesn't have the... I mean, kids now, after 30, nobody knows what the saying is.
No. And also, I think, too, I think the technology would just be... so much and it would be changed. I know, I understand that it's 30 years later, but I just think that, basically what you said. A perfect movie before, don't fix it. Or don't, a good movie before, you don't need to change it.
We're cutting it off here, guys, because we're within a few seconds. But
you should see this movie.
It was so much fun, lighthearted, and just it was a great movie. Like on a weekend at night when you've got nothing going on for the next few hours, throw it on. Big stamp of approval. Thanks for listening. Sorry I talked so much. Sorry I said so many times. We'll be back with something else soon. I didn't have time for a recipe. Deal with it.